In 847 AD, in the Kingdom of Wessex, an Anglo-Saxon prince named Alfred, later Alfred the Great, was born. But first, what is an Anglo-Saxon? Well, by about 50 AD, England and Wales had been incorporated into the Roman Empire, but due to the small problem that they were being invaded by just about everyone, Rome left the British Isles around the year 400, never to return. Britain's native peoples, the Britons, a term which describes a whole bunch of similar, though certainly distinct people groups, but we'll use the broad term Britons for simplicity's sake, were suddenly free to rule themselves, though the power vacuum left by Rome's absence made them a tempting and fairly easy target for anyone looking to seize land and glory for themselves. And that is where the Anglo-Saxons come in. The Angles and Saxons were two Germanic people groups native to northern Germany and southern Denmark, who migrated to Britain in the 5th and 6th centuries and eventually drove the Britons out of everywhere bar Wales. The period from the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons to the year 927 is usually referred to as the Heptarchy, meaning rule by 7, because of the 7 major Anglo-Saxon kingdoms that ruled England at that time. Though keep in mind that as one gets closer to the year 927, more and more of those kingdoms were absorbed into others. Also, in 793, the monastery of Lindisfarne in Northumbria was raided by Scandinavians, Vikings, beginning the Viking Age and drastically changing the dynamics of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. So, to come back to Alfred the Great, in the year 865 his elder brother Ethelred became King of Wessex, which now looked like this, and Alfred entered public life for the first time as his designated successor. Incidentally, unlike in traditional royal succession, Ethelred succeeded not his father, but his elder brother, who himself had been preceded by another brother. This was allowed because under West Saxon law, succession was not guaranteed by birth order, and a council of West Saxon nobles ultimately decided which royal would become the new king. It's for this reason that the adult Alfred was made Ethelred's successor and not the king's own young son. Also in 865, a Danish force, the Great Heathen Army, landed in East Anglia, whose king promptly gave them horses in exchange for short-lived peace. We don't know the exact size of the Great Heathen Army, but it was much larger than any Viking raiding party that had came before it, because this time the Northmen had come to England not just to take wealth, but to conquer the now 4 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms: Northumbria, East Anglia, Mercia, and of course, Wessex. By 868, Northumbria and East Anglia had both fallen to the Vikings, and under the leadership of the warrior king Ivar the Boneless, they were making incursions into Wessex's neighbour and ally, Mercia. The king, Ethelred, accompanied by Alfred, rode out to defend Mercia from the Danes, but by December 870, the invaders had reached Wessex itself. The West Saxons and the Vikings fought a series of engagements across Wessex, notably the Siege and then Battle of Reading on January 4th, the Battle of Basing on January 22nd, and the Battle of Merton on the 22nd of March. All 3 were Viking victories. Interestingly, the leader of the Vikings invading Wessex was a man called Halfdan Ragnarsson, the brother of Ivar the Boneless. According to legend, they in particular, as well as several other brothers, were motivated to invade England because their father, Ragnar Lothbrok, the king of Denmark and Sweden, had been thrown into a pit of snakes by Aella, the king of Northumbria, after a failed raid on England. In April 871, Ethelred died, possibly from injuries sustained at the Battle of Merton. He was succeeded by Alfred, who promptly lost to the Vikings again in May, but he wouldn't lose to them again. Instead, Alfred paid off the Danes in exchange for peace. So did the Mercians the next year, but by 878, the Vikings had invaded again and took control of the kingdom. The rest of Anglo-Saxon England was also firmly within the influence of Viking lords, the most powerful of whom was the new king of East Anglia, Guthrum. In 876, he invaded Wessex, but Alfred's forces managed to hold him off. In 878, Guthrum invaded Wessex again, this time pushing Alfred south into the marches of Somerset. But a few weeks after Easter, Alfred managed to raise an army and he defeated Guthrum at the Battle of Edington in early May. With it clear that neither side could effectively defeat the other, the two men agreed to a peace treaty that would formally be signed in 886. It split England between Alfred's Wessex, which received half of Mercia, and the Danelaw, a loose union of Viking kingdoms led by Guthrum, which ruled the rest of the country. Importantly, Mercia was not annexed into Wessex, but it did cease to be a kingdom. Instead, it became subject to Alfred, and the new lord of Mercia married Alfred's daughter, Ethelflaed. Around this time, Alfred also began to call himself King of the Anglo-Saxons as a whole, not just King of Wessex. So, with peace mostly secure, Alfred set about reforming his kingdom. At his heart, he was more of an intellectual than a warrior, but before he could focus on improving any of his subjects' lives, he first had to make sure that the Vikings weren't going to come back and take them. The most impactful of Alfred's reforms was the creation of the burh system. The burhs were more than 30 fortified settlements built across Wessex and Mercia that made it so no one within Alfred's realm was more than a day's ride from the security of strong walls and soldiers. They also served as markets for England's primarily rural population, and later as locations for England's royal mints. Each burh was given a value which determined how many soldiers it was expected to provide both for its own defence and to serve the king in times of war. This value, denoted as a hide, fluctuated over time, and what exactly the value of one hide was at any given time isn't always 100% clear. For example, if one hide was worth roughly one fully armed soldier, then Alfred's army would have consisted of some 20,000 men, a staggering amount for that time. But if 5 hides were worth one soldier, his army would have been close to 5,500 men strong, a much more reasonable figure. Regardless, the burhs, combined with 2 other reforms of Alfred's, the creation of England's first standing army and a naval build-up, made defence of his lands considerably easier, and when much of the Great Heathen Army returned in 892, they were held off and eventually repulsed. Back at his court, Alfred focused on turning his kingdom into a centre for scholarship. He believed that Viking raids on monasteries, medieval Europe's most important intellectual organisations, had left England lacking learned men, and so he invited many of Europe's brightest minds, including St. Grimbald and the monk Asser, to join his court. To some extent, he was right, but the existence of scholarly works from Mercia from around that time, as well as Asser, who was from Wales, the princes of which had recently sworn fealty to Alfred, have created debate among some historians as to exactly how much Viking raids affected learning in Britain. Alfred himself was undoubtedly intelligent though. He spoke both Anglo-Saxon and Latin, had a penchant for English poetry, and unlike most European kings, he encouraged teaching to be done in the common language, English, rather than Latin. It was during Alfred's reign that the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which documents English history from the arrival of Rome to well past the Norman conquest, courtesy of later writers, was written. It serves as one of our main sources of Anglo-Saxon history. In his personal life, Alfred was married to a Mercian noblewoman named Ealhswith, with whom he had 3 daughters and 2 sons, including Ethelflaed, Lady of the Mercians, and Alfred's successor, Edward the Elder. He is described by Asser in The Life of Alfred as more comely in appearance than his brothers and more pleasing in manner, speech, and behaviour, and in spite of all the demands of present life, it has been the desire for wisdom, more than anything else, together with the nobility of his birth, which have characterised the nature of his noble mind. Admittedly though, Alfred was paying Asser, so draw your own conclusions. Alfred died in 899 of unknown causes, though he likely suffered from Crohn's disease and hemorrhoids for all his life. Alfred the Great was never given that epithet during his life. It was ascribed to him by writers during the Protestant Reformation, who saw him as an example of a king uncorrupted by the Catholic Church, and he also wasn't the first monarch to claim rulership over all England. In fact, his domain wasn't even the largest up to that time, but as king of the Anglo-Saxons, he ensured that England, or at least the parts he did control, would be safe from Vikings and would remain intellectually vibrant, at least for the Middle Ages. The House of Wessex, which he headed, would, from his treaty with Guthrum onwards, rule progressively larger parts of England until his grandson Aethelstan fully united the kingdom in 927. Hey look, you made it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next one. And as always, I've been James, and thank you for watching Look Back History.